Number 2, AB 145 by Assemblymember Galgiani in regards to high-speed rail, and I see your intrepid partner, Assemblymember Gordon, next to you. Ms. Galgiani.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. AB 145 would establish a new Department of High-Speed Trains within the Business Transportation and Housing Agency to strengthen the operational and administrative capabilities of the state's high-speed train project management. AB 145 will define the duties and responsibilities of the new department as well as the relationship between the new department and the authority. The governance structure set forth in this bill mirrors the current relationship between the California Transportation Commission and Caltrans. The new department would carry out the day-to-day activities of constructing and implementing the project, while the authority would continue as the policy-making body. The authority would be prohibited from involvement in the day-to-day operations. AB 145 will help protect the state's financial interests and establish further oversight of the activities and use of the funds to be invested in the high-speed train project. I greatly appreciate the amendments suggested for further consideration. I thought they were extremely thoughtful, and they would help us to chart a middle course for furthering the high-speed rail project. I think they are definitely worthy of our consideration when we bring together our bicameral working group of myself, my joint authors, Assemblymember Gordon and Assemblymember Lowenthal, and the working group from the Senate side that I look forward to meeting with, being Senator Lowenthal, Senator Simitian, and hopefully the chair. Specifically, the suggested amendments in today's analysis focus on functions that will need to be performed for the high-speed rail project and how the High-Speed Rail Authority and Caltrans might enter into a contractual arrangement so that specialized work groups within the Caltrans department can perform some of these functions. With that said, I would like to ask for AB 145 to be moved along by this committee so that we may have the larger bicameral working group that I mentioned earlier, have discussions on the proposed amendments in the analysis, and so that we can continue working together to chart a way forward. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, and I greatly appreciate my joint author, Assemblymember Rich Gordon, being here as well.
And also Bonnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal. Well.
Would you like to add any pearls of wisdom, Mr. Gordon?
I would just note that, and I think it's important, what we're talking about here is not, the language has been used, a new department. This is not a new department. It is transferring an activity that has kind of been standalone into an arena where it has a direct relationship to state administration. So not new positions, not new staff, not new bureaucracy, transferring of a set of activities to a place where I think we can provide greater oversight. And I would echo the comments of Ms. Galgiani that I would hope that this will move forward today so that we can then engage in some real bicameral discussions about what are the appropriate steps to take in providing the appropriate level of governance and oversight to what is the largest single infrastructure project in the history of California.
Ms. Lowenthal. Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to lend my voice in support of this bill and the effort to restructure the governance of the High-Speed Rail Authority. And you know that last week in the Assembly Transportation Committee, we passed out Senate Bill 517, which I believe is the Senate version to restructure the authority. So we are now, I think all of us, looking forward to move ahead and meld these versions into a comprehensive package as we go on and find what our collective objectives are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments at this time? Are there witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Well, I want to thank you, and just for my colleagues. Opposition? David, would you like to come forward and speak? Right there, Mr. Schoenberg.
David Schoenbrunn, the Transportation Solutions Defense and Education Fund. We are concerned about the legislature rewriting an initiative. It's not clear from the bill analysis as to everything that's been changed between the original Division 19.5 of the Public Utilities Code and AB 3034. The changes are hard to track because the section numbers have been changed. So it would be helpful as this process goes forward for there to be a master list of changes. We can see that there have been major substantive changes that amount to a breach of faith with the voters, specifically changing the definition of high-speed rail. Seems like a bait and switch. We support the staff amendments, the staff proposed recommendations for amendments which would remove this definition. There's a section called Article 2 which proposes policies for the authority that would result in integrated planning. We think it would be far more effective to have an authority board composed of representatives of the conventional rail operators around the state, which, when added to high-speed rail, will result in a comprehensive statewide rail network. And we think that by having board members whose interests would be served by having a workable network, that kind of governance board would result in something more effective than what's in this proposal or what's in SB 517. If the committee adopts the staff recommendation to harmonize this bill with SB 517, the current Caltrans division of rail should be folded into the structure to promote comprehensive planning. The new department should be called the Department of Rail or Division of Rail. It's not clear exactly where it would end up, to indicate that all of the state's rail efforts are located there. We object strenuously to the granting of route and fare setting powers to the authority in sections A and E of 185-130. We support the staff recommendation on this and ask that fares be treated in the same way. It is precisely the jealous holding on to these powers that has resulted in a project that no private entity is willing to invest in without ridership guarantees. This bill, in its current form, would carry over the authority's central flaw, political interference in decisions that need to be made by business. If private capital is not able to optimize route and fare design, there will be no California high-speed rail. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Any other opposition? Any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, sir. We have a long hearing, so if anybody wants to speak, if you come up as quickly as possible, we would appreciate it, and try to keep your comments as succinct as possible. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Rich Tolmack, President, California Rail Foundation. Thank you, Chair and members. The Legislative Council's digest on AB 145 is very brief and I think inadequate. It fails to disclose many of the specific major revisions that essentially repealing and reenacting the California High-Speed Train Act entails. This bill is not a minor tweak and is hard to view as being a reform in its current form. AB 145 makes a substantial change that complicates the governance of the project. Responsibility for the high-speed rail project is diffused by producing a second high-speed rail organization, or BT&H, while leaving the authority with independent consulting staff and an ambiguous position as advisor to the secretary. This is a prescription for dueling organizations and finger-pointing that will substantially complicate the job of oversight of the project. The related provision in the Senate high-speed rail bill is superior, since it clearly vests responsibility in the administration. AB 145 undermines the ability to attract private capital to the project by giving the authority power to control selection of routes and set fares. It also gives the authority, not the administration, control of criteria for the award of franchises. And those are key things to keep the privates interested, at least. The provisions in Section 185130 make it impossible for private firms to risk their capital on the project. The existing project already has perception problems with its 100 miles of extra mileage between the Bay Area and Los Angeles produced by entitlement-specific constituencies. Letting the authority retain control of design of the project reinforces the elements that categorize the high-speed rail project as political pork and may make it impossible to produce a profitable Bay Area Los Angeles project. Therefore, obtaining private participation may be impossible without a subsidy revenue guarantee. AB 145 will exacerbate conflicts with Caltrans and other rail operators. No body or process is made responsible for service coordination, and therefore insufficient representation by conventional rail operators on the reconstituted board to make the plan responsive to regional service needs. AB 145 represents a breach of faith with voters who are convinced by specific safeguards which now appear to be missing. The change in definition of high-speed rail from 200 miles per hour to 125 miles per hour appears to undo the safeguards in AB 3034, which require the initial project to produce usable high-speed rail service. Thank you. I recommend that you adopt almost all provisions of the Senate bill, and if anything, the Senate bill needs to be strengthened to make sure that we have an honest and workable project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Just to be fair, anybody in support that we might have missed? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank the author and Mr. Gordon and Ms. Lowenthal. We had, I thought, a very productive meeting last week. We're trying to reconcile the differences of the multiple bills, but particularly yours and Senator Lowenthal's, which I am very supportive of. And we're trying to maintain the integrity of the uniqueness of the policy process in both houses, knowing some people view those as a little bit different. But we're hoping that we can continue to work with you to, as you used the word, I think, harmonize, or maybe it was Mr. Gordon. So my recommendation is to pass the bill, and as the author has committed with her co-authors, we're going to continue to work on this as it goes through the process along with you in the spirit of, once again, is harmonizing the differences and incorporating as many of the recommendations that our staffs come up with at the appropriate time as possible. Senator Lowenthal. You are the author of 517, and I know you've put a lot of hard work into this as the former chair.
Yeah, that's not my issue. I have a couple of unanswered questions. One is I do take exception to one of the things that one of the co-authors said, that by creating a department, as you read through it, that's not the creation of new positions. It is. It is. It talks right here in the bill about the department's under control of a director. The director shall deem necessary, shall organize the department, may organize the department into as many divisions as in the director's judgment. There already is the increase. There is already an executive director of the High-Speed Rail Authority as a authority. So I do see this as, there may be a difference as adding, and it may be valuable to do it. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying this is not viable, but to say that it's not creating a department is just not what's in the department. And once you create a department and you institutionalize it, there are certain issues that go along with that. Maybe the way to go, but it certainly is what this bill does. The second point is that there are a number of amendments that were suggested. It's usually the policy committee that discusses those. Are we just going to say we're not going to deal with the amendments at all and discuss them? We're just going to send it on. Is that your recommendation as it is? Or is it to amend it and then send it on to kind of working? I'm just really unclear what these amendments mean at this moment.
I would never try to stifle your comments or commitments. So the committee's open. You can have the discussion. I'm supportive of moving it along in its current form.
In its
personally.
current form, you would like to see. Okay. The other issue is I'd like to have some discussion of the amendments. Anyway, and the other issue is I don't understand who constitutes this now to make the decision. This bicameral working group, is that appointed by the pro tem and the speaker? Do we just create it, or Assemblymember Galgiani listed the people who were going to be on this bicameral? How do things like this get created that now have the jurisdiction to meld bills? I'm just not clear of this. I've never heard of this.
I know you're new to this process.
I know, and this is quite unusual. We've never created a bicameral working. We've had conference committees appointed when there are different, but we've never created a bicameral that I know of that's appointed by the author of one of the bills.
I'm told, but I'm not certain, but these things have happened in this building where there's an agreement that bills will move through both houses and they will be harmonized. My view is that there's a lot of work to be done. We've been hoping that the governor's office would engage, and I've been led, and I know all of us have been contacted by the governor's office. And the director of OPR has talked to me, and I think he's probably talked to all 5 of us in addition to Senator's Committee in trying to set something up. But because of the budget process, I think justifiably the administration said that they wanted to wait and get the budget done and then turn to this. My own feeling is, in terms of the precedent setting of doing something like this, maybe my perception is different from yours, Senator Lowenthal.
Oh, I'm just wondering. I've never heard.
I don't think it's that unusual that we try to work with the other house on big issues like this where we've had differences of opinion. My personal feeling is that those differences can be reconciled based on my discussions, particularly last week, and our discussions together. I think both of the authors have had, both Ms. Galgiani and you have provided the leadership, and quite frankly, as a new chair, I look to both of you to how do we remedy these differences. This is too big a project for us in the legislature to fail at and to get it right. So I'm open. I think given that we've been all preoccupied on the budget process, this is one of those things where I think, having been in the Assembly and now being over here, that we have a bicameral legislature with different approaches to policy committees sometimes. This is one of those instances where I think it's best we put those aside as best as we can and try to allow for the time frame. So I have no specific ideas other than to continue to work with the Speaker's office and with the Pro Tem's office and with you and the author to try to reconcile the differences. I wish we could have done it in the past week, but given the budget, I don't think that was possible. It wasn't possible, evidently. So.
And if I might add that if it were done in the last week, we might not have had the benefit of the new suggested proposed amendments that I, again, would restate I think are very worthy of consideration. And I would like the benefit of having the discussion with my joint authors here and Senators Lowenthal and Simidian, who have been following the project very, very closely from day one, as have I. And I think that we'll all be better for it to have the opportunity to have the discussion together and try to figure out with all of us together the best path forward, charting the course forward for the project.
And what I heard from you was a commitment that you weren't saying no to the amendments, you just wanted to have that further discussion.
Yes, yes.
Could we have a further discussion? Could you discuss each amendment in this committee? That's why we are a policy committee.
Okay. Sure. How would you like to proceed? Would you like to go through each one?
Yeah, there are 3 amendments that were requested. I'd just like to know whether the author thinks that usually they're accepted as author's amendments or not. I would just like to know where the author is on these 3 amendments.
And while we'll give you a moment to do that, we do have a quorum here, so we'll ask the Secretary to call a roll for purposes of establishing a quorum.
Senators Desmonier?
Here.
Desmonier present. Gaines? Here. Gaines present. Harmon? Huff? Here. Huff present. Kehoe? Lowenthal?
Here.
Lowenthal present. Pavley? Rubio? Here. Rubio present. Simidian.
Assembly member?
To address Mr. Lowenthal's questions, I have not had the benefit of talking with my colleagues, Assembly members Lowenthal and Gordon, about their views on this, and it would be my preference to be able to speak for us as a group. But just to glaze over what I do know and would like to offer and share on each of these. With regard to the acquisition and management of property, I will say that this was a goal of the former director and myself when he was here, Mr. Mehdi Morshed. We had gotten together with Caltrans. Mr. Morshed had entered into an MOU with Caltrans for securing personnel to be able to do acquisition and management of property. It was not believed by Caltrans at that time specifically that they had the appropriate staffing levels to be able to share their staff with the High-Speed Rail Authority. Since that time, Assembly Members Lowenthal and myself and Gordon have met with others, and we are trying to pull together a meeting with the Director of Caltrans and the Director of the Authority to discuss what would be needed to be able to enter into an agreement where Caltrans can actually provide the staff to do the acquisition and management of property. So that is a goal that we share with what's proposed here. With managing the outreach and project communications, I know that just recently the firm that was handling this for the authority has resigned, and there is a need for this. I don't know enough about this without further research and information shared to be able to comment specifically other than that. On legal staff, I do know that the authority has relied on legal staff from the Department of Justice, the Attorney General's office, and I believe Caltrans as well heretofore, so it seems as though that would make sense. With regard to federal grant administration services, I don't have enough information to speak to that and would like to learn more about that. And then lastly, on number 1, I vaguely recall a bill last year that allowed Caltrans to do some pilot projects that were design-build projects as a pilot. I don't know the size and scope of these projects, but I recall that Caltrans was to report to the legislature on the outcome of doing the design bid projects. So I think that it's worthy of consideration. We should look at what the legislature did last year in this area. And again, I'd like to continue the discussions before, speaking as to accepting or declining any of these amendments. I don't think any of us here at the table know enough information to be as thoughtful as we should be in considering these. And I want to make sure that we get this right. The 2 technical amendments, changing 110 miles per hour to 200 miles per hour. We had planned to accept that.
Amend the bill to conform to Prop 1A, an existing law.
Yes.
And
yes.
also
dealing with the selection of alignments as opposed to routes.
Yeah.
That amendment. Yes, we had planned to take those 2 amendments.
Oh, you do have plans. Okay. But you don't want to take them in this committee.
I'm open to it. It might be cleaner to do it all at once. I would defer to the chair.
Why don't we take them in this committee, if that's okay, Ms. Galgiani?
Okay.
I think we're going to get there anyways, and if it will help with the process and Senator Lowenthal's concerns, I think that's in the spirit of what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, so the motion would be to do pass as amended to appropriations, taking the technical amendments with a commitment that we're going to continue to work on this in the next couple of weeks, and that we're open to the amendments, the other amendments, as suggested. Is there a motion to that effect? So moved by Senator Keogh. Do you have any closing comments?
I ask for your aye vote, and I appreciate the consideration and the patience of the members of the committee.
Thank you. We'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Gaines, no. Harmon? Huff? Kehoe? Aye. Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal? Pavley? Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian.
Okay, the vote is 3-1. We'll leave that on call. You need 2 more votes to get it out. Thank you.